What's up, guys? Today we're going to be learning how to play the Polish opening. That's right, we're doing an opening video, something that I haven't done before, but you know what? Why not start now? So, this opening starts with the move 1, b4, and now you're going to see this opening is typically a little bit worse for white, but it does still have fighting chances. You know, you're going to be fighting for the center from a flank rather than just launching pawns forward, which a lot of openings typically do and a lot of people tell you to do. You're going to ignore the principles and attack from the side, specifically the queen side. So, let's say they go here, you're going to bring your bishop out, and from here, there's a few things they can do, but if they do anything at this side of the board, you're going to get this pawn for free. So always, in this opening, you're going to be wanting to look for early blunders, as well as, you know, obviously, ways to destabilize them from a side so they can't really defend the center when you go to make your central push. But again, if they say they bring their knight out, this is just a free pawn. So a lot of people, especially early on, will blunder this, but typically if you're playing a stronger player, they won't do that, even though I've had 2000s, even higher than that, blunder this against me. Typically you're not going to get this in an actual game, but if it is there, just make sure you spot it. But say they do the actual move, which is here. Typically I'll just go all the way back. I know the engine says, oh, kick their bishop out, whatever, but I'd rather just play passive. I know it's not really good, but still fine. Let's see if they castle. We're gonna start bringing our pieces out, and again, this opening is going to be worse at the start. That doesn't matter. We do not care. Okay? Now... oh, that's the wrong move. We're just going to start developing. And you see, if they just go for like basic development, we're already equal. So it doesn't really matter. But they can start doing their thing. But we're just going to, just set up. And we're gonna castle over here too, because unlike us, they don't really have any, flank attackers on our position. They do have this guy here, but we're gonna easily kick him out in the future. And whereas we set this bishop up in the opening, they have to take time to get their other pieces out, bring them over here to start attacking our king. While we already have this god of a bishop lined up on this long diagonal, ready for an attack whenever we end up mobilizing on the king side. But they do this, and let's just say they fianchetto their bishop. We don't care. We're just gonna castle here. Now, again, this bishop can be kicked out at any point in time, but he's not really doing anything right now, so it's better to just ignore it. Because, he poses no threat, and now that we castled, we can move this pawn freely at any point in time now. So, it's always good to just not always address their pieces, which I know a lot of beginners like to do. They're like, oh, this guy is too close to my king, let's get him out. You don't need to do that. Okay? But this is like a typical setup you could get in the Polish opening. But there are a few other lines streamer I play against. They have a different approach. Say I go here. Rather than going e5, they like to go e6. Okay? Now, I like to push the pawn here because, you know, it just gets out the way. But they like to go here. And, you know, it's a very interesting move. They're obviously just going for the center in their own way, while I just have this pawn out here. You know, you could en passant, which is what I tend to do. And then I go here, they'll go here. I'll go here. They tend to go here, which... No, not here. They go here. I'll go here, then they go here. Sorry. They don't go here because that just hangs the pawn. I got the order wrong. But, you know, I'll go here, they'll go here. I'll go out, they'll go here. I'll go here. They castle, I castle. This is something they like to do against me. Because rather than somewhat equalizing, they still have a slight advantage. You know, they have more central presence, whereas we're still building up on this side of the board. Let's see, what do they like to do here? They go here a lot. Then I go here. They'll go here sometimes. I'll do this move. And in a lot of games, we end up somewhere like this. You know, because all the way at the start, rather than going two squares, they go one. And then we end up going here. You don't have to en passant, but come on, you have to. But no, you don't have to do this, because this is equal. If you don't, you just, you know, guard the center over here. You're a bit better. It's 0.1, which at most levels doesn't mean anything, but you know, it's just equal. But obviously you gotta en passant, and you're gonna still get your bishop out. They're gonna bring their knight here, we're gonna develop, and we're gonna end up somewhere like this. And again, you are gonna be slightly worse, but it's still anyone's game. Now, since I misspoke earlier and already showed you this trap, let's just say we go here, here, not there, here, here, and here. This is always, again, a common trap you want to look out for, but not always immediately. Like, they can go, like, do other stuff. Like how I showed you earlier. They can do all of this and still ignore this pawn, you know? So, even somewhat out of the opening, this pawn is still always something to look out for, because, you know, like I just missed it when memorizing the games I play against them. You know, this is a very common trap. It's a trick, but it's always something to look out for at any point in the game. Now, let's say they don't do any of that. You know, you're gonna go for this. Some people want to play the Dutch against you. For whatever reason, this isn't a good opening against the Polish. Because you see, typically the Polish is worse in the opening. Here it's better, because they're just straight up, you know, saying, hey, we're just gonna expose this side of the board, you know. And, you know, we're just gonna let you do your same opening principles, but just have a very exposed king. Because, you know, you're still just doing your thing. But they chose to just play the Dutch against your Polish, which, you know, just let you get over here. Now, so rather than doing any of that, they're going to pre-move the Karo Khan against you, because they are convinced this opening is god tier. You know, Gotham Chess plays it, so it must be good. So, it's something you're gonna run into at some points in time. So, but again, we don't really care. We're just gonna do the same thing in this opening. If you can get this pawn here, try to. It's always gonna be annoying for them, because say they just go here. This pawn is always just gonna be annoying for them. If they take it, you're gonna get your bishop out. They can just block, but you're still getting development. They're getting pinned. They're gonna have to spend time, kicking your bishop out. So it is just something to try to do, even if they do something you're not expecting. Not that move. If they do something you're not expecting, you can just always look to get this pawn here. It's gonna annoy them. They already stopped their knight from getting out this way, because now it's going to go over here in the future. And you're just kind of asking questions here. Now, if they ignore it, do not take the pawn, okay? Don't take the pawn. You want to get taken. You want them to take your pawn. Because if you take, you're just letting them get out. And when you pin them, well, they can just immediately remove you. You don't want to take unless you're already getting kicked out. Instead, you want to support this pawn. You want to anchor your pawn by going a4, and again, you're going to be slightly worse most of the time in the Polish opening, but again, there's always fighting chances, because you're looking to attack them from a flank. But say they just don't care, again, you're gonna not care and just start developing, the castle. And in this opening, a lot of times you don't have to castle at the start, because you have this kind of brick wall in front of your king. They can't really get to you. Yes, if you put your knight here, it's gonna have this pin, but you just kick them out. Doesn't really matter. They're gonna try to start getting their pieces out. You're gonna go here. They might... What would they do here? They might attack you in the center. You're gonna say, I don't care. Just start kicking their bishop around. And again, this is worse, which isn't really the point of an opening. But there's always room for them to make mistakes. Like, say you just get your bishop out. If they decide to be greedy, take a pawn. If they push, they are going to be slightly better. But people won't know the best moves. Like, a lot of people are just going to say, hey, let's trade. And then, you're equal again. So, expect to be worse, but be on the lookout for any mistakes they make, because that's really the point of this opening. You want to take them out of a comfort zone and make them make the mistakes, rather than you blundering every 15 moves. They're gonna blunder every 1 in 10 games, I'd say, depending on what level you're at. Below 1,000, you're gonna see a lot of people blunder against this opening. 1,000 to 1,500, they'll start, maybe ironing out the kinks, but there's still gonna be, middle game chances, as you can see here, if they decide to get greedy. And 1,600 to 2,000, I'd say it's suboptimal, because you aren't exactly gonna be able to trick people as often, but it is still gonna, get play. As again, it's one of those openings people don't really study for or study against. So, it's always one of those things to just keep in your back pocket, rather than your E4, your D4, your English, whatever it may be. It's just another, a shock opening, is what a lot of people call it. But rather than just yapping about this game, I'm going to show you some games I played with it and how it can work against, people at my level, people above my level. And alright, here we have a game I played. We're going to start off strong. A game I played against a 2300 in a bullet arena. Again, that streamer I brought up earlier, I don't think I ever mentioned his name. His name is PJ's Chess. PJ's Chess on YouTube, TikTok, and Twitch. So, if you ever want to play games against me or him or, this 2300 right here, for example, always look out for that. He streams pretty frequently, almost every day, I'd say. But, just stop by, show him some support. I think he's trying to get to, right now, he's on the road to 100 subs on YouTube. So, he's a smaller creator, but, he's a gem of a smaller creator, you could say. I totally haven't used that phrase before, but let's get into it. You're gonna see me mess up, you're gonna see him mess up. But the opening here, it's equal. So this opening does, and I know I said earlier, don't take this pawn. This is a case you want to take the pawn here, because they committed their knight to the center, so they're not going to have a knight able to replace it. In this situation, you want to take the pawn. Now, I do this a lot. It is typically worse, but I like to, this move kind of kills the fun, but I like to set up for a c4 pawn push, but they prevented that here. But as you can see, in a bullet game, we're staying equal with this guy. We're slightly better. But this opening is all around, pretty solid, I did get my king on f2, kind of funny. Because I was seeing, okay, the h file was open, I got my pawn on g5. I'm gonna try to, in the future, get my queen over to g1 maybe, and double up on the h file, try to start an attack, because obviously they have these rooks that can always defend, but it's a bullet game, you never know what's gonna happen. And as you can see, I start bringing my queen over, thinking it's a good move. They immediately address the threat, and I'm worse, but you're gonna see, we're gonna start goofing around, and they immediately, make a mistake. And they let me get my queen here to h2. Now nothing can really stop me from going h6, then taking the pawn on g6, which is exactly what happens. I just get my queen over here. Now, they decided to block with their queen and get checkmated in 2 moves. They could have moved their king. They could have done anything here, but it's a bullet game. You're gonna see that mistake happen every now and again. But the opening itself, again, the opening works against people at this level, especially in a faster time control if they're not expecting it, or if they've just never seen it before. Look, we're slightly better here against a 2300 at the 1500 quote unquote. My rating probably doesn't reflect my actual strength. I am kind of all over the place, ups and downs. meeting people above my level, losing to people below my level. I am an enigma, as you could say. But this opening is, just really hard to play against if you're not expecting it. There's another game here. We're gonna play against someone like at my level rather than a 2300. You're gonna see they choose this setup, and I didn't go over this in the actual opening thing, so it's a good thing I brought this game up. A lot of people will just, play a very slow system rather than trying to attack. They'll play the King's Indian against you. Okay? They're gonna play the kid against you, as one could say. And in this opening, again, you're gonna be worse, but you want to do this. This is the suggested move a lot of the time, to get rid of their strong bishop. In the King's Indian, in the Dragon Sicilian, that bishop is their pride and joy. You want to kill it as soon as possible. Now, while you get rid of your bishop, they have fianchettoed a knight. That knight is misplaced, so they're going to spend time fixing that in the future while you still just get your development. And the game's going to go on here. And here I took this, ignoring the fact that they just have checks, but they traded queens. We went here, they went here, then the game goes on. And here I sacked a knight. You might have seen the short. Funny enough, I made a short about the other guy that I showed you. These just happen to be some of the higher up games in my game history with this opening. But we sack a knight and we checkmate them. Now the opening itself could have gone better, but as you can see, any tiny mistake and you just instantly come back. This is a very user error kind of an opening from your opponent. It's not really anything you do, it's what they do. They're gonna be the ones making the mistakes because you just, play the opening and just wait for them to mess up. We're gonna have one look at one last game, and fittingly, the guy is from Poland. I know, crazy. But we're playing the Polish against a Pole. But let's see how this game went. They immediately go for this. This is something else you're gonna see. A lot of people play whatever this is for some reason. And, you want to take that knight, mess up their structure, and then proceed to be worse and worse and worse. Have your king up here. But again, they get greedy in this opening. They get greedy. This opening is very much about your opponent getting greedy. And now you can see again, they just got greedy. They didn't have to do any of this. They got greedy. And I ended up winning. Because they just decided to blunder a queen in one move. So, you are going to mess up in the opening, but that's going to make them overconfident. It's going to make them oblivious to certain things. It's going to make them take a free rook for some reason. Because Why else would you take a free rook? Man, like, that's obviously a bad move. I mean, look at this. Look at my queen and my bishop. Look at their queen. Look at my rook. Look at their king. Okay, but that being said, I hope you learned nothing from this video. Do not play this opening. No, I'm joking. I hope you enjoyed the video. You know, maybe we'll see more like this in the future. But let me know how uninstructive my commentary was, how I could do better. And yeah. Peace out.